Well, welcome. This is John Sarver from Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. Yeah, welcome to our Thursday evening Zoom, My Solar Story. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, which include the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Homeland Solar, McNaught & McKay Electric, Iron Ridge Racking, and Harvest Solar. And I'd also like to, I know many of you are GLREA members. If you're not, I'd like to encourage you to join us and help us support our advocacy and educational efforts. And tonight we have an interesting topic, Ag and Solar, not a zero-sum game. And Charles Gould from MSU Extension is going to be our presenter. And Charles, why don't you start by just giving folks a little background about yourself and your position there.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, John. And it's an honor to be able to speak with all of you tonight. And I've got about a 30-minute presentation, and I'm hoping that this turns into a session where we can answer questions and have good dialogue here. This is certainly an issue that is on a lot of people's minds, especially in rural Michigan. So I work for Michigan State University Extension. I've been with MSU Extension for 26 years. I've spent most of my career working with farmers on manure management issues, and Extension asked me to move into the renewable energy field here about a decade ago. And so I've really been, I was focused on anaerobic digestion for a while, as converting manure into biogas. And then I was asked to move into the solar arena, and that's where I've been ever since. And so I'm excited to be able to talk about this topic, and looking forward to sharing some of my ideas with you, how we can integrate ag and solar. So John, I don't know if you want me to keep on going or if you had something else you wanted to say. Okay, so I'll keep going. So I would just ask everybody to mute. It sounds like we've got someone that's not muted. All right, so. Okay, John, are you seeing just that one slide?
Yes, I see Ag and Solar, not a zero-sum game.
Okay, all right. So it's not ag or solar. It's ag and solar. And I want to provide some reasoning behind why I say that. It's definitely not a zero-sum game. There's a lot of opportunities here. So I want to start with the big picture. Here about, I guess it's been a couple of months ago now, a group of us from Michigan State University Extension and from the University of Michigan put together what's called a Planning and Zoning for Solar Energy Systems, a guide for Michigan local governments. We did it because we were trying to help Michigan communities respond to the challenge of being solar ready when opportunities for solar development presented themselves. So if you haven't seen this guide, I would encourage you to download it. I'll give you the link here at the end of my presentation. It has really been, it's been received very well. We're finding that it's been downloaded. I don't know, it just seems like, where you hear where the solar issues are in the state, this document has been downloaded, and we're hearing reports that it's used to help guide solar ordinance development and make decisions related to that. So it was written for use by local planners, officials, legal counsel, and policymakers. So this was a reviewed document. It's not something that we kind of just pulled out of the air. There is expertise on this team for developing, solar ordinances, but we sent it out for peer review, and it was reviewed by attorneys, solar developers, local planning and zoning board members, Michigan Public Service Commission, and a host of others that we sent the document to. So it's had a lot of eyes on it before we released it. All right, so in the document, when you download it, you'll see that we base our ordinance, our guide, on the fact that the community master plan has to dictate the placement of where a solar project goes in. And so if the master plan doesn't have a designation or reference to where solar development can occur, then that's the first thing that gets taken care of. And that master plan should mirror or reflect what those community goals are, such as resiliency, economic development, farmland preservation, climate action, energy generation, and other things that the community thinks is important. There's no reason why solar projects can't go in any township, really. Where they go in should be dictated by what the community wants and how that's reflected in their master plan. So after a community has incorporated solar development into its master plan, the zoning ordinance can be amended or developed to include regulations for those configurations.
Car key.
Why?
And we consider large-scale solar energy systems, they tend to be allowed as principal land uses of property. All right, so with that in mind, let me introduce the concept here of dual use. And that's where I want to spend a lot of my time here, because if your master plan includes agriculture and it's something that's important to the community, then this is how it becomes integrated into your solar ordinance. So what dual use is the integration of solar energy, the integration of a solar energy system into an agricultural system in a way that enhances a productive, multifunctional landscape. So what we're saying here is that a parcel of land shouldn't just grow racking systems. Okay, a parcel of land should have the solar energy system, but that land should have another use. And what we are proposing is and I'm having a difficult time advancing my slides here. There we go. So there's 4 options that all have agricultural connections: conservation cover, agrovoltaics, grazing and forage, and pollinator habitat. And I'm going to explain each one of them. So what conservation cover is these are practices that are put in for a specific purpose, like protecting species, specific species, or providing a specific ecosystem service. Now you notice that the picture depicts an Iowa prairie strip. So prairie strips are being used right now to hold soil in place, to act as a buffer for runoff and things like this. And these are deep-rooted plants. And as you can see in this picture, they're multi-species. Now, some prairie strips are going to have plants in them that are going to shade out that lower tier of your solar array. So a prairie strip in a solar energy system, if it has those types of grasses, are going to be the type of thing that you want to put around the array, between an edge of the array and the fence, rather than, you know, in between the rows, or in the rows between the arrays. So conservation cover compared to a buffer strip, and the way that I want to think about this, the way that I want to present it to you is comparing prairie strips to just turf. And I guess I will just say quite bluntly that there's not a place for turf in a solar system. Okay, the roots, there's just not enough root mass. When you look at the operation and maintenance costs for mowing, and the environmental impact that fumes and things have, you know, the emissions from mowing, I think that we want to do, or that we can do something better than putting turf in. So when you look at prairie strips and you compare them to buffer strips, what you see is an increased abundance of birds. You see increased number of flowers. You see increased flowering diversity. You see an increased abundance of pollinators. You see increased honeybee production and increased abundance of key natural enemies. So this came from a presentation that I heard on Tuesday that is based on research out of Iowa State University. And I think there's opportunities to adapt this prairie strip to solar energy systems. Now, the one thing that we really, one of the great advantages of putting something like a prairie strip in, besides the fact that these are native plants and you know, all the benefits that come with soil organic matter retention and things like that, is that they hold the water in place and allow the water to percolate down. And that percolated water then fills in our groundwater. And we really need to recharge our groundwater reservoirs. And so what the potential for large solar energy systems that have prairie strips in them that allow this water to percolate down through the soil is that these become recharge areas for groundwater. That's a tremendous advantage that we need to, you know, keep in mind as we look for ways that benefit society. So I didn't want to leave that bottom italicized sentence here. All of these benefits occurred on commercial farms using herbicides and insecticides, including the neonics, the seed treatments. And that's significant because prairie strips are designed to be the least intrusive of a farmer's practice. So you can see in that top picture there that farmer has rows right next to the prairie strips. So if a farmer is getting the benefits that are there, all those increased all those advantages, then just think of the advantages that are going to come when you put a practice like this in a solar project. All right, agrovoltaics, that's the second practice here. So these are solar sites that are focused on raising crops for food, fiber, and fuel within the project area. So there's a growing body of research that shows that vegetable crops can grow underneath solar arrays. There are shade-tolerant vegetables, for example, that can grow underneath these solar arrays. And the advantage that growing under a solar array has is because you have water retention. So water is not going to evaporate from the soil because it's shaded. And so when you have adequate moisture and you have shade tolerant crops, then you are able to have success in growing marketable crops. So I wanted to give you another example here. These are blueberry fields in Japan. Now, I recognize that there's going to be solar developers in amongst us, and I know the first thing they're going to say is, "Oh, look at all the money in the racking system that, you know, how high it is." And there's some real opportunities here if we think outside the box. And let me give you an example. A lot of the indigenous people that live here in Michigan use blueberries in their for religious purposes, as well as part of their diet. And there's opportunities here to work with the tribes in the state to implement solar projects over fields that are growing blueberries. And granted, you know, this particular example is not, we don't see this yet in Michigan. This is something that I'm attempting to do, trying to start with the folks that I'm working with here in the state. So another example that I wanted to share with you is back in December, I got a call from a brewery and an organic farm in Berrien County. And they were looking at the possibility of putting a 2-acre site on the organic farm and growing greens that the brewery uses for their sandwiches and for their salads. And so we talked about that, and I gave him some information, gave him some things that they needed to check out and, you know, to look to see if this was something that they thought was feasible. So fast forward to Monday, I received an email from a gentleman that owns the brewery, and he provided me with information that indicates that they want to take this to the next level, that they want to attempt to put a solar energy system in and raise greens. So I'm going to be heading down to Berrien County here in the not too distant future to take a look at their site and try and move this project forward. And I felt that was, you know, that's really significant. It's a 2-acre site, but, you know, you've got to start somewhere. And if we can make that work and we can learn from it, then I think we can extrapolate that out into larger projects. This is the one that I'm really, really excited about. Grazing and forage production. This picture right here is taken from a 11-acre site that is adjacent to the Herbrook Organic Poultry Farm off of Grand River in Ionia County. And there are 2 sheep producers just within a half a mile of this site that are providing the sheep for this particular for this site. And so there's 11 ewes that are grazing here, and they've set up a rotational pasture, a rotational system that has kept the forages under control. So we had a pasture walk there, and I'll show some pictures of that here in my next slide. But so prior to the pasture walk, which was, I don't know, in August, I think that's when it was. I had been there back in June, I think. And this picture that I'm showing, the one that's in the foreground here, what I'm trying to show is that the lamb's quarter that was there was above my waist. And so over the time that the sheep were in there, they had taken all the green leaves off the stems of the lamb's quarter. They had also eaten down the foxtail that was there. And then they laid on the stems of the lamb's quarter. And what you see here in this picture is the effect, the result of the sheep doing what they do best, is grazing on the green forages that are there. Now, the criticism to this site is that there's no, grass, that was planted there. It was all basically weeds, but the sheep still went in and they did a marvelous job at controlling the weeds there. So, lesson learned here was that there may not be, forages suitable for good sheep production. There may be weeds there, but the sheep will do what sheep do, and that is they'll eat just about anything. So this site should have grass coming up this spring, and it should look a lot better in terms of what sheep are needing in order to thrive on this particular site. So here's pictures from the Pasture Walk. So these are a few of the ewes that were there. You can see on this side, the lamb's quarter and the foxtail that they had not grazed down yet because there's a fence there. But here's what it looked like having been grazed. They were fortunate enough to have water that they could just run a hose out to. So they moved this up and down the fence row, which the fence row is right along here in this particular picture here. So as they, and the paddock, so looking at this picture here, west would be where my cursor is over on this side, and east would be on this on where my cursor is on the other side of the picture. And that was north. So the paddocks ran east to west, and this water trough would move on this side of the fence as the paddocks were moved. So this is Herbrook's organic poultry facility in the back there. This is another shot of the lane where the sheep had grazed the lamb's quarter and the foxtail down. So the last one practice that I want to talk about is pollinator habitat. And this one seems to, I wouldn't say be the most controversial, but it's the one that seems to be the least understood. So a couple of years ago, yeah, it's well, probably about 18 months ago or so, folks in our entomology department developed what they call the Michigan Pollinator Habitat scorecard for solar sites. And its intent was to be a planning guide. It never was intended to be a maintenance, to provide maintenance. And so there's 9 sections in that scorecard, and based on how you answered the statements in each of the 9 sections, you got a point, a certain amount of points. And when you added those points up, if you were at 76 or more, then that meant that you were implementing a habitat, a pollinator habitat, suitable for pollinating insects. Well, there's some question about, what each one of those sections mean. Some are, I guess I wouldn't say some are clearer than others, but some, there just seem to be, in terms of definition, what some of those sections mean. So one of the things that we're doing is we're submitting a funding request to Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development to develop modules that correspond with each one of those 9 sections. So we can clearly, so there's clear direction on what each one of those sections mean, and try to avoid the confusion that seems to have been brought about by the scorecard. The other thing that we're doing is we are the missing piece here. A successful pollinator habitat really is predicated on in doing it right up front, because it takes 3 years really for a pollinator habitat to get fully established. After that, the maintenance piece is really critical, and that's where we see the weak link. And so we're in the process now of trying to develop some modules that will help consultants who already know their stuff. I will grant that, but provide an additional resource as it relates to maintaining pollinator habitat in solar energy systems. A couple of years ago, we took a roadshow around the state when solar developers were canvassing the state and really giving lease agreements to farmers, and farmers were confused about what the language was and if they should do it. And there was just a lot of confusion about whether they should accept these lease agreements or not. And so we put together a program, took it on the road. And as we met with farmers, one of the things that they were really concerned about when we talked about solar energy systems with pollinator habitat was that they would end up looking like land that's been in conservation reserve, or it's called CRP. And what would typically happen with CRP land is that it would look really nice for a couple of years, and then it would go south. It wasn't maintained, and so autumn olive would move in, and you get thistle and other kinds of invasive plants because it wasn't managed correctly. And so the maintenance piece for these solar energy sites is really, really important. And we wanted to just make sure that there was at least some guidance there on how that could happen. So the scorecard can be found at www.pollinators.msu.edu, and you can see there on the screen there the different 9 sections and the the parameters in each one of those sections and the points that are allotted. Okay, so why do we want to put pollinator habitat in? Well, it's in part the roots. When you look at native grasses and forms and you compare it to turf grass, it's the root structure here that really matters. Keeping soil in place, slowing the water down so it doesn't travel with such velocity over the soil surface, giving that water time to percolate down, building up soil organic matter, breaking compaction levels. There's a host of advantages for putting in pollinator habitat. So another reason for establishing pollinator habitat is simply to stem the decline of pollinators. And it's not just the brown patch bumblebee that's on the endangered species list. There's a recent study that just came out that basically says that pollinators as a whole have declined. And if we lose our pollinators, we're going to lose a big chunk of our food, because they are the workhorses that keep our food supply coming. Pollinator habitat provides nesting and feeding habitat, which supports healthy population of native pollinators. The ground nesting bees, for example, are very effective pollinators, but they need this kind of environment in order to raise a brood and go through their life cycle. Contributes to local biodiversity. Again, there's another study that shows that it's not only the pollinators that are attracted to this, but it's insects that eat crop pests, for example, aphids. There are natural enemies to aphids that will come and complete their cycle in these pollinator habitats. And they'll go out into soybeans and corn and other crops looking for aphids and do a, and really be those natural predators that are so critical to, preventing insect pest spikes and for that matter, the spread of disease by those same insects. So enhancing crop pollination leads to improved crop yields. And there's an ample amount of studies that demonstrate that when you've got this pollinator, this pollen base, this nectar base, and these insects go out and they also pollinate cucumbers or blueberries or peaches or whatever species of crop or type of crop that's out there, that there's the result is an increase in crop yield. And I mean, this probably wouldn't, care, you guys probably wouldn't care much about this, but native pollinators are, they get with it. And if we can encourage the growth of native pollinator populations, then farmers can reduce their costs by not having to have so many honeybee colonies. So there's some real symbiosis here between crop production and yield and these pollinator habitats. So I wanted to provide some resources to you. Excuse me. MSU has some really good websites that you can go and get information on. So we've talked a lot about, for example, prairie strips. We've talked about pollinator habitat. Well, there's two websites here that if you're unsure about the type of plants that can be grown in Michigan, check out this Native Plants and Ecosystem Services website and check out the Michigan Pollinator Initiative. So I would just put a plug in here in this Michigan Pollinator Initiative. If we've got consultants that are listening that design natural habitats or are seed distributors of native plant species, if you go to the Michigan Pollinator Initiative and you look for pollinator plantings, you click on that and you go to large scale pollinator plantings. There's a link to a link to a spreadsheet. You just click on that spreadsheet and you can get yourself listed there. We refer individuals that are looking for those kinds of services, on a monthly basis. We get contacts, we meaning us working in MSU Extension. And so that's our clearinghouse for our clearinghouse to send people to who want that kind of information. So when you go to the site where you download the spreadsheet, you'll notice that in the box it says if you want to add yourself, then send it to this email address. And don't send it to me, send it to the email address that's listed there. The planning and zoning guide that I talked about earlier would really encourage you to download that and read it and take a look at it. PA 116 information, if you've got land that's enrolled in PA 116, your only option is to put a pollinator habitat on it. So you're gonna need to use the scorecard for that. It's got to be a 76 or higher. And then if you haven't checked out the American Solar Grazing Association, I would invite you to do that. There's a ton of information out there about grazing sheep. I might add that there's 84,000 plus ewes here ewes and lambs in Michigan. If we were to take, the rule of thumb is 3 ewes per acre. If we were to take all the solar projects in the queue right now, we wouldn't have enough sheep for that to service the acres in queue. So we've got to grow if we're going to go that route, we need to grow our sheep industry. We have a sheep processing facility here in Michigan, Wolverine. It's out of Detroit. And a couple months ago, I called one of my colleagues to find out about the kill floor space. They're at half capacity right now. They've got a lot of capacity for processing sheep, lamb in particular. And we have ethnic markets here in the state of Michigan that are wanting more lamb. We just aren't there yet. So let me frame this and I'll wrap up here. So why would a farmer want to graze sheep in a solar project? Well, what most sheep producers do is they graze during the spring, summer, and fall, and then they have to have additional acres for hay for the winter. So that's an expense. They have to go out and purchase that hay. So what a solar project does is it allows them to take land that is not in grazing production, that wasn't grazed before, and utilize it. So it's new land for grazing is what I'm trying to say. Then they can go back to the acres that they have in pasture. They can cut that grass and put it up. So they've got hay for the wintertime. So this really becomes a win-win situation for the solar developer because they get to, this helps overcome the resistance from the rural community. This helps the sheep producer by providing additional land that he or she can use to graze sheep, and helps address the hay issue over the wintertime. So let me just conclude with these thoughts here. So dual use options are dictated by community's master plan, and I really want to emphasize that. A lot of our townships don't have ordinances, but those that do haven't really, a lot of them haven't thought through the solar energy piece of a master plan. And that's what this guide will help them do. And I hope that what I have shared with you today illustrates the fact that ag and solar is not a zero-sum game. You can have ag and solar, you just got to plan for it. You've got to have the right players. And, we're in the infancy here in terms of ag and solar. So we're all going to grow together on this. Dual use practices include conservation cover, grazing, forage, pollinator habitat, and agrovoltaics. Pollinator habitat provides economic, social, environmental benefits. Well, they all do. And I probably ought to change that bullet because they all do. And the last point here is avoid bee washing. We've all heard of greenwashing, but what we're starting to hear in the state is that some folks are saying, oh yeah, we're putting in a pollinator habitat, we got it established. But then when you look at it, it's just the bare minimum. And it really is not in the long term going to support any kind of pollinating insects. It's just the minimum to get by to say that, it's a pollinator habitat. And we need to move beyond that. And I recognize that there's some economic factors here. But myself and some colleagues of mine just put a grant in to help us understand the types of seed mixes that would be suitable for grazing sheep and suitable for pollinating insects that are not going to break the bank. We think that there are seed mixes out there, and I have the right people on the team to help us figure this out. And if we're funded, then we want to develop these seed mixes, get them out there for people to see, and just as quickly as possible. All right, so there's my contact information here. And John, I went a little bit over, but
Well, that's fine, but great presentation. That was all very interesting. And, we have over 40 people here, so you're on 2 screens. So why don't you use the reaction button at the bottom of your screen to the right? Because if you click on that, you'll see raise hand, and that'll be easy for me to kind of see who has a question. So if you have a question, just go down to reactions and hit the raise hand button. And so far.
okay, Lee, I see that you're on there. Come on.
Yep.
You got to have a question.
Yeah. Frank just did the thumbs up. Oh, he's okay. Go ahead, Frank.
You're on mute, Frank.
Yep, you're still on. You're still muted. Here, maybe I can. I unmuted you. Go ahead.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. That was great. And I really love the work you've done so far on this. And we're continuing to battle the misinformation that is being spread everywhere. And I would love to hear any suggestions you might have about what kind of strategies we might implement to counteract this misinformation. And where do we go from here, basically?
Well,
this information is all wonderful, but we've got to get it into the hands of the decision makers.
Absolutely agree. And one of the reasons, one of the models that we use with farmers to help change attitudes and perceptions is we hold field days. There's nothing more convincing than getting a farmer out to a field and actually walking around a piece of equipment, letting them kick it, look at it, going out into a field, letting them see what the crop looks like, letting them look at leaves. We got to do the same with those who are spreading misinformation. We got to do the same with our legislators, with local planning and zoning board members. That's why we held the Pasture Walk, because we wanted to actually show, like this picture behind me, we actually wanted to show people that there are sheep in Michigan that are grazing in solar projects. So what I'm saying here is, I'm willing to work with anyone that is interested in putting these types of projects on the ground.
Charles, could we get you to come to Blissfield Township and put on a presentation? We're planning an open house of a sort to promote solar, to educate. Actually, farmers don't need a lot of convincing, at least not in our area.
Right.
It's not farmers that are spreading this misinformation. It's actually folks who are politically motivated most of the time.
Yeah.
And are trying to undermine all the efforts. And many of them are funded by dark money, fossil fuel interest and such. And the only thing I can think of to combat this kind of misinformation is to provide solid, good information and do a lot of it, because these guys are out there, they seem to have bottomless pockets on this stuff.
Yep. Yep. I'd be glad to do that. I'm actually in the process right now of lining up. Massachusetts has a lot of these types of projects that I've just described, and they've been doing this now for a number of years. And I'm lining up a tour of a whirlwind tour of a bunch of facilities in Massachusetts that are gonna, where I can take pictures and where I can physically be there, and I can do the same thing with, in these projects that I do with farmers that I work with. I can kick the tires, so to speak, and I can see the actual crops that are being grown. And so we just need to get more projects out there, and I'm willing to work with anybody that wants to work with me.
Not only more projects, but we need more people like you out there spreading the word.
I agree. I've talked with my administration about that. And, if someone would pony up half of the salary and support that someone like myself would need, I would be pretty certain that my administrators would pony up the other half.
That's a good point, and I think that might be done, especially if we can do some introductory material of this type.
Yep.
Well, go ahead, Jay. You're up.
Okay, well, thank you, Charles. Really appreciate your presentation. Of course, I always hear from folks that are concerned about wasting good farmland for, putting up solar arrays and not growing crops. But this definitely is a symbiotic relationship, and you get the best of both worlds. On a different note, my wife and I, we over the last few years, we tried a 30-foot by 30-foot garden. Discovered that neither of us have green thumbs, so we ended up tilling it over and planting bee and butterfly friendly seeds.
Yeah.
So I had put in a ground array of just a half dozen panels on the north end of that 30 by 30 foot space, only to find out the seeds that we got grew plants, flowers and such that were over 5 to 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
It's shaded by arrays. I solved that problem by building a solar shed, which is taller and it gets the panels up high and provides storage space. But my wife did find a solar-friendly seed mix. I don't know the name of the company, but none of the plants are supposed to grow more than about 30 to 36 inches tall. So if I can find what the company was that made that available, I'll share that with the group. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So let me address your statement about prime farmland. So our position is that prime farmland shouldn't really go into solar projects. Okay. But the caveat there is that's dictated by a community's master plan. So if you look at Natural Resources Conservation Service, they're the soil experts. They have soils delineated into 8 different categories. So prime farmland is designated as either a 1 or a 2. And then it degrades as you go down. So if a township is concerned about preserving prime farmland, they can put in their ordinance that land that's designated as prime based on the Natural Resources Conservation Service soil designation, then is outside the realm of solar development, but everything else is fair game. So, and then the other thing that I wanted to just put out there is I was talking with a gentleman who's a board member in a township, and a planning and zoning board member in a township in Sanilac County. And he was telling me that they had 500 feet setback distances that they'd put 500 feet setback distances in their ordinance. And I said, well, why in the heck would you do that? And his answer was really simple, because what they had envisioned is for large solar projects, they want to have that 500-foot buffer there because they can get normal farm machinery in that 500-foot buffer, and they can farm like they would normally in that 500-foot buffer between that outer fence and where the solar project is going in. So, I mean, it was, and that may not work for every township, but, you know, at first glance, I thought that was a pretty good idea.
Go ahead, Ben, you're next.
Thank you, John. So I arrived a little late, and it's been several decades since I've been a farmer, but but I'm watching climate change, and we're seeing longer periods and more intense droughts during the summer. I'm wondering with these systems, if there's been any studies that have shown a reduction in moisture loss or a reduction in the stress of, on plants, pollinators, beneficial insects. I would guess even sheep would show less stress having the shade of solar panels.
Yeah, you are exactly right, Ben. And there has been, and that's what is really exciting about the opportunities here. The University of Arizona has done extensive work in that area, as well as University of Oregon, I believe is who the other one is. And independently, they've been able to show that the moisture saved underneath solar arrays translates into, you know, the cooling of the arrays underneath the arrays, and the retention of moisture, which translates into vigorous crop growth and our plant growth and yields, great yields.
I think
So-
that would
Go ahead.
definitely be an encouragement. It should be an encouragement to farmers to realize this is an advantage that will benefit them, especially if they're doing like sheep. I think I've seen hogs as well. Oh, by the way, have you seen high racking at all, Charles? Like for, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, I have. And there was one of the pictures I showed in the beginning was in the middle of a beef feedlot somewhere down around Manchester, Michigan. And really that's the only one I've seen in Michigan. But I think that's where we have to go. I think if we're going to have solar projects in rural Michigan, we have to figure out, I don't think they're going to go in if there's not an ag component. I guess I'll just be that blunt.
I agree.
You've got to have the ag component. And if that means that panels are raised, you know, further up, then that's what we do. I don't see that we're gonna, you know, this renewable energy is not going to disappear. Even if we get a Republican president, we are too far down the road on renewable energy to back up. We're gonna, you know, so let's figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, Julie, you're up next.
Hi, I'm from Montague, Michigan, and we just have our first solar farm that came into, it's 180 acres on Sicking Farm. And
Yep.
so
I know
the
Danny.
township is right now are doing the ordinances because it hasn't gone as well as they thought. Okay. And I think some of the things that needs to be reassured for some people is that when I've been going to the township meetings, I'm not on the township at all, is that there's no real incentives for the township. There's no kickbacks. They're not like a Walmart coming into the tax base. One is not, you know, and like the power is going to the grid, but it's not staying in Montague. So those are the kinds of things that I think that people get, well, what is it doing for us? You know, besides, he's using his property efficiently. Yes, I can see that. If you're not farming on it, but I can see the township's view that, you know, this isn't really doing anything for us. And they've run into a couple of snafus where they removed the topsoil, and so now there's going to be water, you know, drainage coming over the road, and so it's a learning process. So I encourage them to get a hold of you because, and I downloaded your guide because I think they need to be able to have their ordinance. So I'm hoping that they get in contact you, but what I think also too, having you come to talk, because a lot of farmers now are turned off by it. They've been getting notices in the mail about solar projects, and because they're like, well, wait a minute here, this went on. And so I think that they need to be encouraged that maybe having somebody that's not from the actual, the renewables, or from, they use Macbeth Solar, that doesn't have anything to gain. So to come and talk to them. So I don't know if you do that too, on top of helping with ordinances or not. But anyhow, that's kind of where we're at on that.
Yep, I sure do. I'd be willing to do that. I actually know Danny Sickinga very well. I've worked with him over the years.
Okay.
He composted his manure, and that's how we first became acquainted. Last time I was there, he was talking to me about grazing sheep, because his daughter lives just down the road, and she raises sheep. And so he was trying to understand what the options were on that. I did go to the site, and I did talk with the site supervisor. He just blew me off. So I haven't been back there since.
Abraham, go
Okay, are
ahead.
you talking about the township supervisor?
No, the site, the solar site, because I went there when they were building it.
Okay,
So
okay.
Who was the developer?
I've since forgotten.
Macbeth Solar. It's Macbeth Solar and then Pine Gate Renewables is who that did the project.
Thank you. Yeah. Abraham, go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder whether you can change the incline of your panels and how you then how you surface them. How do you clean the surfaces, and how do you deal with it in the wintertime, for example, with snow?
Yeah, so tracking systems track the sun as it goes across the sky, and so that changes the angle. There's a lot of fixed there where the racking system is fixed, and so it's just set where the greatest amount of sun over the year could be, the greatest amount of solar energy could be captured. I've got a blueberry grower here in Ottawa County that has a set of solar arrays, and I've been at his place in the wintertime as it was snowing, and there was some reduction in the amount of electricity that he was producing, but he was still generating electricity. And it really, cleaning those solar arrays off is, I mean, you can go out there and do it, but nature does it the best, and they just seem to take care of themselves. It's not really an issue.
Thanks.
Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, the comment about tracking, Charles, you could say that the single axis trackers make agriculture much easier, because more soil gets the brightness of the night of the north sky, and you can tip them up so that when you drive through, both rows are pointed up, and therefore you have a very open path to go through.
Yeah.
I appreciate you recognizing the American Solar Grazing Association. They've have contacts around the world, and one that I was very interested in was Australia, where they had some land that has 8 inches of rain a year, and it was impossible to use. I mean, it was a desert, but they put in a solar array, and that reduced the moisture loss from the grasses that were there to the point that they could start grazing. And they recognized improved wool quality because the sheep had a safe place to be out of the sun. And I think Cornell has done work with body monitors on cattle, actually monitored heart rates, and found that having that ever-present aid is really a benefit for the animals.
Yeah.
And,
University of Minnesota has done that too.
Okay. And any plant we should point out to people that any plant that we eat the leaves will be bigger if they're grown in partial shade than they're grown in bright summer sun.
Go
So
ahead.
thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Thanks. Hey, I'm wondering, I've read about the 100
Can't hear you, Joe.
20 acre installation site at MSU there in East Lance, and wondering if y'all are planning on doing. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think
Oh,
the
dear.
gist of the
I was
question
asking
that,
about the 120. There's going to be some experiments with that.
yep, yeah. Well, um, so the short answer is, I think so. Where there's some resistance on the part of the solar developer to allow us to get on the site and use it for research purposes. And I want to speak respectfully and courteously about them and about our administration. So I hope that we actually can. And I think I'll just leave it at that.
Great, thank you.
There's hope.
I hope so too.
Yeah, there's hope. Clyde, go ahead. I think you have the last question, Clyde.
Okay. Charles, the odds of piggybacking pollinator habitat and carbon credits?
I can't hear you very well.
Oh, well, I've got a question in the chat. Look in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Let's look at the chat. Okay, let's see.
I appreciate everybody that's hanging in there. We're at 33. That's awesome.
I think Clyde Taylor says, is there a potential to piggyback pollinator habitat with carbon credits?
Yeah, there is. And that's the thing that as I have been talking with farmers, I have been making sure that they know that they need to put in their lease agreement that they get to capture the solar, the carbon credits. We're moving in that direction. Carbon credits are monetized now, but they're not part of solar lease agreements, and they need to be. That's part of how we keep farms in business. You know, we take the opportunities there that are presented. I mean, 25 years with a pollinator habitat. I mean, there's research that shows that with sheep and proper grazing methods, that we build soil organic matter at an increased rate over time. That translates into more carbon in the soil. And so those carbon credits need to be captured in or acknowledged in a lease agreement, and they should go to the farmer. So Clyde, you're absolutely right.
Well, you know, we're at 8:05 now, so I think it's time to wrap up. Charles, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I think this has been very helpful to us in a lot of different ways because there is so much misinformation out there. And I think you've given us a lot of good information that we can use as we talk to people and kind of hopefully correct some of the misinformation. There sounds like there's some great potential. And yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to do this. And you know, all these presentations are recorded and are posted on the GLREA YouTube channel. So if you go on YouTube and, you know, search for GLREA, you should be able to find my solar stories. And we have I think over 80 videos now on a variety of a lot of solar stories and a lot of other topics. So thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We got a really good attendance, and I appreciate the interest and a lot of good questions. And Charles, do you have any, John, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to welcome Katie back. We're really happy to see her on Solar Stories. So I just want to acknowledge her.
Yeah, Katie
Thanks.
was working with us, and she's at graduate school at U of M, right? So
All right.
yeah. Hey, thanks, everybody.
Have a good
Take
evening.
care.